So we all know that Jesus died on the cross to save sinners. And when we think of sinners, I think most of us think of really bad people. You know, the murderers, the thieves, all those sort of people. Of course, that's not us. And so I suspect that there's something where we don't necessarily feel that we needed Jesus to die on the cross for us. I don't know whether you ever feel this. You know, we come every Easter, Good Friday, we commemorate the cross. But sometimes there can be a feeling of like, am I really that bad? Am I that bad that I needed this to save me? And maybe the way we understand sin is completely wrong. And therefore, the way we understand the cross is all a bit wrong as well. You know, we focus so much on the big signs of evil. And maybe that's not actually the main problem. Yeah, there's this understanding deep in Catholic spirituality that these big sins that we react to, in some sense, they are a symptom of the deeper disease. They're not actually the disease themselves. You know, someone who murders or someone who steals, you know, that's a particular manifestation of this deeper disease of sin. And all of us have that same disease. The image that's sometimes used, like if you go back to some of the earliest church theologians, they say if you imagine that sin is like a tree and all the branches of the tree are different sins. You know, there's murder, there's adultery, there's theft. But the place where that tree is getting its life from is from the roots. The taproot underneath the ground, the thing you can't see, that's the source of all of it. And they basically say the taproot of the tree is pride. And you can cut off all these branches. You might be suffering with habits of sin in your life, and you can go through and cut them out. And what you're going to find is they're going to keep growing back because the taproot is still strong. If you want a good example of this, when you leave church today, walk down the fence line. There was a big mahogany tree that was threatening to fall on the road last year. And so we cut it down, you know, a couple of hours with a chainsaw, cut it back right to the ground, and we even poisoned it. We got everything we needed to try and kill the stump. But if you go there now, you're going to find about 7 mahoganies now sprouting out of the trunk. Because that root is so deep and so strong, and it's like, you're not going to kill me. I'm going to keep coming back. That's the reality of what's in the human heart. And so when we look at what Jesus is doing by going to the cross, that's the thing he's trying to save us from. And the mystery of this is that he does this in 2 ways. Firstly, by dying to break the power of sin. He takes that sin upon himself, and as he dies, the effect of that sin dies in us. You know, we receive forgiveness. But there's another side to this, where he goes where no other human being was ever prepared to go. He goes into this place of absolute self-emptying, allowing himself to be stripped of everything, and in doing so breaks the power of pride. Now, the gospel we've just heard, we don't get the whole chapter here. The chapter begins where Jesus says, the Son of Man, meaning himself, is going to be arrested, he's going to be scourged, he's going to be beaten, and then he's going to be killed. And then on the 3rd day, he's going to rise from the dead. So Jesus has just prophesied saying, everything about me is going to be stripped away. I'm going to be completely destroyed. This person that you are expecting is going to become some great worldly king, it's not going to turn out the way you think it will. And as soon as he says this, James and John are thinking, maybe this is the right time to ask if we can be exalted and sit at your right hand. You can imagine Jesus just slapping his forehead thinking, you don't get it, do you? Like, this is not, it's not the right time and it's not the right question. You've completely missed the point. If you want to follow me, this is where you've got to follow me to. Now, this doesn't make a lot of sense because all of us are living in this experience of pride. Now, fundamentally, what this comes from is the fact that as human beings, we are terrified of our weakness. We know deep down that we are absolutely nothing. You know, we are like a speck of dirt that gets wiped away at the end of our life, never to be thought of again. And that terrifies us. And so there is something deep in us where we are trying to prove that we are significant. Somehow it's like we're shouting to the universe that we exist and that we have the right to be seen. This has been in us ever since the time of the Garden of Eden. You know, as soon as Adam and Eve ate of the fruit of the garden, it says they saw that they were naked and they were ashamed. And from that point on, they were desperately trying to cover their nakedness with fig leaves. This is the human experience. We are deeply ashamed of our weakness. And so we are desperately trying to cover ourselves with something to hide our weakness and to proclaim to the world that we're valuable. Now, there's three key ways that we do this. The obvious way, the stereotype of pride, in a sense, is that we try to become great and successful. You know, I'm going to try to achieve and prove that I'm good enough. My identity becomes based on my success or on what other people think about me. And there's a lot of people in the world caught up in that. But you might be sitting there thinking, that's not me. I'm not interested in worldly glory. The other two ways are a little bit more subtle. There is a way in which we can actually use religion as a way of covering our nakedness. If you remember that parable Jesus tells where the Pharisee stands at the front of the church and he's like, God, I pray every day, I fast twice a week, I give 10% of my money to the poor. Look at me, I'm amazing. I'm not like those people who are trying to become successful in the world. Actually, you are. You know, once again, I'm afraid that I'm nothing, that before the sight of God, I'm just like a speck of dust. And so I'm trying to use these things to say, surely I'm good. You know, surely I've got value. Now, the third way is even more subtle. That's where we actually use our rejection as a way of proving that we're valuable. You know, that's when the person who says, look, I'm terrible, I'm nothing, and they're actually kind of looking for someone to boost their ego. You know, it's when the person makes the most amazing meal and they bring it out, they say, oh, it's terrible, it's terrible. No, you won't like it, I'm sorry. It's that very subtle way where we're actually looking for validation. It's the universal human experience. All of us are there. But this is where it brings us back to the cross. If this is the place where our deepest sin, our deepest brokenness is to be found, the only way to be liberated from that is by being completely secure in our nakedness and our brokenness. If you go back to the story of the Garden of Eden, It was only when they ate of the fruit of the garden that they suddenly realized they were naked. Up until that time, it wasn't a problem because they weren't clothed with fig leaves, but rather they were clothed with the knowledge of the love of God. They were so secure in the fact that they were loved by God as completely insignificant creatures. They didn't care. And it's in knowing how much we are loved that we are not afraid of having everything stripped away from us. This is why Jesus goes to the cross. He basically says, I'm going to show you the way. As he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That he will be prepared to have absolutely everything taken away from him. That even though he is God, he's prepared to be humbled to the point of being like a slave. And he goes there completely confident and secure because he knows how much he is loved by the Father. And in doing so, he shows us the path of freedom. This is where he wants to lead us to. When Jesus says that those who humble themselves will be exalted, he's actually revealing this great paradox. If we can come to this place where it's not about us anymore, I'm no longer fighting to try and prove myself or boost my ego. I no longer care about that. I'm just now living for the sake of others. At that point, it gives God the space to actually do something amazing through you. When we celebrate the lives of the saints, we're kind of celebrating people who got over themselves. They were not trying to achieve great spiritual glory. They didn't need that for the sake of their ego. They were just trying to get out of the way and let God do something amazing through them. And if they succeeded, they didn't care. If they failed, they didn't care. Because it wasn't about them. They were just trying to love because they were being loved by God. And this is where he's calling us to. Wherever that is, whether it's in your marriage, your family, your workplace, to come to a place where you are so secure in the love of God that it's not about you anymore. That you can allow yourself to be stripped down by the failures, by the humiliations, and in some sense see that as being a beautiful thing because that's how that taproot of pride gets killed. And to realize that the more that happens, the more the glory and the light of Christ is able to shine through us. And even without trying, you're going to find yourself changing the world. And you're not going to be sort of caught up in that. You're not going to be worried about whether people notice it. Because it's only about the fact that you're loved by Christ.